Hi, welcome to Glitters of Life podcast. I am your host Rohit Kokane, and we have got another rolling, exciting episode for you. And this is going to be an interesting one because what I believe is that all great things takes a lot of efforts, and it has to be great efforts. And so is the business. One of the things that I believe will take great efforts. And to build that great business, what I feel is that we need a lot of insights. And to gather those insights to talk about how to build great businesses, we have got a very special guest to talk about that, and she's Ella, a growth stage consultant, high impact speaker and facilitator, and podcast host of On Air with Ella. So, Ella, welcome on the show. It is such a pleasure to have you over here.
Hey, Rohit, it's my pleasure. And thank you for sharing your audience with me. I know that you take very good care of them, so I am honored.
Thank you so much. And Ella, when we say this word or when we hear this particular word, or if we are into this business thing, what comes to your mind first? Because I'm totally in love with the kind of business that I'm into, and I feel that business is something that drives the economy. It holds the people accountable for whatever they do. It serves as the purpose to each and every individual. So when we talk about the business, what are your initial thoughts about it?
They're a little chaotic, if I'm being honest, because like you, Rohit, I am multi-passionate. And that is great until it's not. And so one example that I can share to flesh that out is I've had an offline corporate consulting business, as you mentioned. I'm a growth
Yeah.
stage consultant for small to very large companies. And I started that company with my partner in 2003. So it's
Long
been
time
a
back.
minute. Yeah. Yeah. And that is almost completely offline, meaning we did not need to leverage social media, for example, to grow that business. And truly never really have. And then you flip the script entirely, and an enormous part of my professional endeavors now is an online platform that I started in 2015, and that is the On Air with Ella podcast, and another podcast, a second one that I'm about to launch in the next 2 months. And they are very different businesses with very different demands. So
Yeah.
it truly is contextual, Rohit, and why you're doing what you do and what you're seeking from it.
Right. And we have to be very intentional, is what I believe, Ella, because when we are into that particular journey of entrepreneurship, or if we are building that particular business, we need to know like what we want to achieve from that particular business. It's not just about making profits, but how we are helping that particular economy, how, what kind of products we are serving, what kind of solutions that we are providing to the customers or to the people who we are dealing with. So it becomes more intentional. And when we talk about being intentional, Ella, what I feel is that when we are into business, avoiding stupidity is easier than seeking brilliance, is something that I have always believed. So I feel that it is really important to be skilled and belief driven entrepreneur. So during your journey, how this has transitioned, that what kind of skills you have honed, what kind of belief that you had, and it changed your perspective towards business or being an entrepreneur.
Well, Rohit, one of the things that I do is I always tell the truth. So this may not be the answer you're looking for, but I'm about to tell you the truth. So I think what you just said, excuse me, I think what you just said is so important, that seeking meaningful work, seeking purposeful work, like that's a life well lived, right? But I got to
Right.
be honest with you, Rohit, when I started and I was 28 years old and I needed to make a living, I think my slogan was more like, "Will work for food."
Yeah.
Like, I will take the job and then I will figure out how to do it. And I bet that a lot of people listening are either in that situation or have found themselves in that situation. And frankly, I think it's a luxury to be able to get past that survival mode and really start looking as to how you can create work that is meaningful and purposeful and aligns with your gifts. And you said something that I love. You said, am I quoting you right? You said avoiding stupidity is
Yeah.
basically will yield a better outcome than seeking brilliance.
Yep.
I love that. I'm stealing that one, Rohit.
Definitely, because then there are a lot of ideas that are floating into the market, and people try to vouch on that particular ideas or those ideas. Like, I'll be doing this, I'll be doing that. But again, you never know which one will be successful, and so that you don't have to be very stupid. It's about your brilliance. It's about your skills, what you are good at. You just need to know that particular fact, because see, building a business or doing a business is quite easy in that particular terms, like in layman words. But when you get into that particular domain, when you have that team around, you just need to allocate a lot of time with respect to the expertise they are into. So you can't do all of that. It's more about like delegating and focusing on your expertise, so that we grow ahead and ahead. What's your take?
I think that you're hitting the nail on the head. And to fully answer your question, I think this is more evident in my online businesses than my offline business. Because when you have an online platform, like I do with the podcast and the events that I hold for women and that sort of thing, you tend to fall prey to the seeking brilliance, and you want to
Yeah,
show up and you want to cut through the noise and you want people to know that you exist. And frankly, nobody would enjoy saying it this way about themselves, but at the end of the day, you're seeking attention. Now, probably in many cases for the right reasons, right? Again, you're trying to stand out in a crowded market. But when your focus is on seeking brilliance, to use your word, or in the case of, say, social media marketing, as another example, you're seeking attention. And what I have learned is if you can seek respect through being good at what you do, it's a very different energy. Does that make sense when you're
yeah,
focused on
definitely.
creating value, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that is something that I have learned from my father. Like, he had nothing into business. He started his own business, built that particular trust and legacy. Now people do trust him. There's the name into the industry, and then again, it is something that we all have to know. Like, once you are into that particular business for the longest period of time, you gain that particular trust, you gain that respect, and that is something will help people to buy from you. But again, you need to provide the quality as well. And when we are into entrepreneurship or business, it's more about like, to get what you want, you have to deserve what you want. So that is something that we have to segregate more often. So there's a lot of boring work that is involved into the business as well. We can't say like, oh, hey, it's quite exciting, I love to do this, I love to do that. We come up with the morning affirmations, and so like, I'll be having exactly a great day, but it may not happen. Just like my podcast light went off a few hours ago before the podcasting. So that is something like, these challenges are for real. So what's your take on the importance of boring work? It may sound like a boring, but it's like the day to day task, which can be a kind of a routine task, and there's no exciting thing, but we have to do them to run that particular business.
Be careful what you get good at, because you might find yourself in a career or in a space that you started because, as I was joking about at the top, you needed to make money or money was your sole focus. When you become good in a sector you're not in love with, it is so much easier to be burnt out by the
Yeah,
boring stuff. So, to your point, the boring stuff exists, but I think that there are probably three tiers of this type of boring admin or logistics work that lights up absolutely nobody. And one of them is like the things you have to do. And it doesn't matter who you are and what you do. So I have to pay my taxes every year on two companies and in my personal life. And I have to do that every year, and it is not optional. And giving that any emotional energy more than it deserves is a complete waste of my life. So that's one type.
yeah,
Then there's the type, though, where you have created work or a project or an entire industry or business for yourself, and you find the work terribly rote or boring, or it's not fulfilling in any way. And Rohit, I don't know what you think. I think that is so different than doing the boring, administrative, not exciting, not sexy tasks of something that you love.
yeah,
So I spent 20 years kind of, it was gradual, but
okay,
falling out of love with the high corporate work that I was doing. And then when it gets to the mundane part of that job, it starts to really weigh heavier. And that is so different than doing the mundane tasks that are associated with the thing that lights you up.
Yeah, yeah, that's so true.
I think it's important to just be aware and ask yourself the type of question that you're asking me and really self reflect. And I think that's probably the first step in terms of managing how to cope with that. It depends on which of the three that it is.
I do agree, Ella, and that has been the case with many people because they feel that 9 to 5 is very boring. Like if they are into job, and business would be something very exciting. They'll be their own boss or something like that. But it doesn't happen that, because when you're doing into the like when you're into the business, you just have to learn a lot of tasks. So, for example, my core expertise goes into finance, but still I have to like look after the accounts as well. I'll be at the billing section as well. I'll be a floor shop manager as well. So there are a lot many tasks that you have to do. It may sound boring for you, but again, there is no shortcut for achieving that particular success into the business. And as you said earlier, Ella, what was the core difference between doing the online business and the offline business? Like what kind of stark differences that you find, and which one is better in your opinion?
Well, I thought they were more different than they are. My consulting business with, like I said, everything from owner operated businesses, small businesses, to publicly held, $5 billion in revenue type companies. All of the work that I do in those spaces is based on relationships.
Yeah,
So it's not based on email marketing campaigns. It's not based on a social media following. As I said, it's based entirely on relationships and referrals. And so put a pin in that. Compare and contrast that to a world where you're supposed to cultivate your email list and you're supposed to market all of your own work all of the damn time. And you have to have a website. That's just, that is entry level. And you
yeah,
have to have a social media presence, and the list goes on and on. But as it turns out, Rohit, they are much more similar than I appreciated because, as I said before, if my focus is on shouting through the noise when it comes to the On Air with Ella podcast or my online communities, if that's what my focus is, that is entirely misplaced. So when I realized that creating value in that space actually depends on relationship and connection, it made it so much more fun. It made it so much more rewarding. And frankly, 10 times easier to do. And to be specific with that, I'll give you two examples very quickly.
sure.
One is Instagram used to be like, oh, I'm busy. I have to post like my avocado toast or behind the scene. Like, what am I doing on Instagram? Right. And when I realized that it's a space to connect with my most engaged listeners who want to kind of see a day in the life and connect with me on a human to human level, that changed the game for me. You
Yeah,
and we met of all places on threads, on
yeah,
threads, on threads.
true.
That is Instagram's Twitter,
Yeah.
right? Okay. So I thought that that was nonsense. And then I started really engaging with the podcast community on Threads.
Same here.
You and I met. I do no promotion on Threads at all. I only add as much value as I possibly can and ask questions so that other people can add value and build relationships there. That is 10
Yeah,
times more fun than trying to figure out,
absolutely.
what to post.
Yeah. And we don't have to chase those algorithms as well. It's more about like what you're seeking from that particular individual. It's more about like, for me, again, I get that aura, I get that personality from the social media presence. It's more about that. And once you know that this is the right person, you just have to email them. You just have to have that particular first conversation in place. And if the business will happen or may not, but you just have to build the relations, because you might get referrals as well. You might be able to start new business. You might be finding like partners as well. So it's more about that particular thing. And again, the online world really help us, and the offline is again something which is coming back on the tracks of like digitalization is what is actually happening into that particular space. But when we talk about the business, it's more about like providing value. but people have got that fear as well. So like, what's truly holding us back? We say it's perfectionism or overwhelming thing or procrastination. What's your answer for that?
What's holding us back? What's
Yeah,
truly holding us back?
yeah.
I mean, we could have an entire show on this conversation,
Should we start
but
it?
yeah, let's start it. Okay. So you touched on a couple of things that we say. We say it's not ready yet, or I can't launch this, so to speak. Of course, it depends on what you're passionate about and the thing that you're called to do. But let's say it's launching something into the world, whether it's your blog or your book or an online program, etc. And that thing we call perfectionism is the exact same thing as procrastination. It's just sort of wearing a different outfit. At the end of the day, it's fear. It's terror about putting ourselves out in the world, about
Yeah,
failing, about showing up and embarrassing ourselves and landing flat on our
yeah,
faces.
yeah.
That, and of course, sometimes, Rohit, sometimes we have competency gaps. There are some skills that we need before we do a thing.
Right.
Even once we pick up those skills or enough of them to get going, I think invariably it's actually more of this mindset thing that you and I are identifying. And that is real. And just because I'm not saying, oh, it's just fear. Like, fear's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Definitely. They are.
Yeah. Yeah. And it keeps people from doing a whole lot of things. And the question that I would challenge us with, myself included, is would you rather suffer from falling on your face and maybe tripping over yourself and maybe having a failure of some kind in the doing? Or would you
Hmm.
rather suffer from the regret of never, ever trying the thing that you are called to do?
Right. That's so true. That is
You know,
something.
you know what else, or hit something that people should talk about more often? Nobody knows what they're doing. Like everyone thinks when you're younger, you think that, oh, I wish I had what he has, or I wish I could have, I wish I could just download whatever's in his brain and put it in mine, or I wish I was born under different circumstances and blah, 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 blah. You know what? Nobody knows what they're doing. If they're growing, if they're stretching, if they're trying something new, they are making it up. Sometimes better. There's good, better, and best. Some people are really like naturally more
Yeah.
inclined towards success. That exists. However, if you think that that person has something you do not, I beg you to just start because nobody knows what they're doing.
That's so simple. And we don't put a lot of time into figuring it out that particular thing. Like we just have to get started. And like you did talk about that particular competency gap thing. Our learning approaches are very different. If I have
Yeah.
to like for me a learning could happen from a podcast as well, but for you it could be from blogs or some kind of articles as well. So how we can bridge that particular competency gap if our learning approaches are different and we are into the same business but have to apply various difficult decisions and like have to take those decisions to run the business?
Yeah, I think the shortest way, this is not rocket science, but the shortest way to get better at anything is to go to somebody who has already done it, right? Great,
Yeah.
simple, easy. But I don't mean literally, I don't mean that everyone can call Rohit and say, tell me how to start a podcast. I want to start tomorrow. That is not what I mean.
Not
What
this.
I mean is Rohit creates public information. You give away a great amount of value for free. If I am trying to learn from you, I can go start consuming and immersing myself in your world. In reality, I can go to another human and say, I am seeking a mentor. Would you be
Yeah.
willing to mentor me for 90 days? I can pick up a book from someone who has done it before I do. What I'm really trying to say is we make this more complicated than it needs to be.
We do.
And I do I do all the time. So I'm in the middle of up-leveling all of my podcast infrastructure. I just realized I've been in the game for a long time and I have not up-leveled my equipment or the software that I use or the way I produce it. And so I sort of did an audit, Rohit, and I've been changing everything, which was
Everything.
stupid. I should have done one at a time. But I'm just like 110%. And I did really simple things that started with my willingness to be the dumbest person in the room. So check your ego aside. I did not worry that people would think I didn't know what I was doing after 8 years on the air. And I just started asking questions. I posted, you see me post this stuff all the time. I'm like, this is what I'm doing. This is what I want to do. What are you doing? How do I do this better? And getting free answers that like, it's so simple. It just starts with your willingness to be the dumbest person in a room so
Yeah,
that you can learn from others. And then we have never lived in a time where it was easier to get a hold of content in whatever learning style, to your point, works for you.
right.
In the history of the world, it's never been as easy as it is now.
Absolutely, Ella. And I do agree to the advice of like get started. You'll be able to figure it out later. But it's more about like get the basics things right so that you won't have to suffer a lot. Because when I started my podcasting journey, I just got started. That was fine. Like, but I felt that I could have done more better with my cover art in first place. Then again, the audio quality, there are a lot many elements that we have to take care at the first instance, because at times that change at that like the branding that happens initially will always be remembered for whatever you have created. Again, people have got kind of a short memory these days, but it creates a long lasting impact once you have those particular things figured out really well at the basic level. This is something that I always advise to the people, and it could be applied in the business thing as well. And now I see that you have created that particular brand presence, you have that brand, you have that reputation, but it's quite difficult to keep that particular reputation into place. It's more about like being consistent with it. It's more about being authentic as well. So I feel that whenever it is not working, we try to quit it. But my take is very different out here. I feel that you just have to quit when the industry disappears, because until then you have got the chance to figure it out a lot of elements. So what's your take on to that, and how has been your relationship with the fear and failure?
Yeah, this is really, really important because a lot of us are waiting for inspiration to strike us or motivation to strike us before we do the thing. And that can be, we decided we wanted to get healthy and now we're just sort of waiting for like something really motivating to happen. Or we want to launch the thing like we've been talking about, whatever you are called to do, or start the business. And a great many of us are waiting for inspiration to truly strike to sort of get us up and going. And I think what you'll find in every single case is that inspiration is on the other side of starting.
Yeah.
And it is okay to circle back to what you're asking. It is 100% okay to start where you are. And
Mm-hmm.
you can go back. I'm going to give you two examples to to I'm going to give you two examples to flush out what you are saying. The first one is On Air with Ella. I started it. It had a professional polished brand, but it was very health and fitness focused.
Okay.
4
Yeah.
years later, I changed the cover art and I tweaked the theme a little bit. 8 years later, the cover art has changed 4 times because, as you said, we think that memories are long and that we are so important to everybody and that they are sitting around thinking about these things. No, no.
No, not at all.
You start where you are and you use what you have. And that is, oh, and repeat and repeat, and your brand evolves with you. But now let me contrast that with my new podcast that I'll launch, like I said, in a couple of months.
Yeah.
If I were waiting for it to be perfect, Rohit, it would never hit the airwaves ever. It would
Ever.
not happen. And this is a very different podcast. It's about business and success and failure. And I have recorded 10 episodes and 0 of them have made it out into the world. Here's why. I did not know what I was doing. I told you nobody knows what they're doing. I did not know what I was doing. I started, meaning I had an idea, but it wasn't fully baked. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I recorded 5 interviews And then I realized what this needs to be. So the first 5 interviews will never see the light of day. My condolences. And the second 5 interviews and everyone thereafter are like 10 times better because I started before I was ready. Starting before you're ready does not mean the whole world has to see it. It doesn't mean that it's on the airwaves. It means that you started and you learned and you refined and you got some feedback and you developed your concept in motion, not on your sofa. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah, definitely. A lot. That's really good approach, I feel. And it's more about like what's your purpose behind that particular business? What's your purpose behind the kind of thing that you have to build? And if you feel happy while doing that particular thing, that gets really exciting because we have to love in first place. Though it's for the audience, though it's for the consumers, but if we are enjoying it, then we are going to put a lot of efforts into it while growing that particular thing. That is something that we have to learn. And there have been a very different type of business men's out there or business women out there. Like there have been entrepreneurs who are like product driven, where the product itself caters to the need of the audience. That product gets like it's very much wanting into the industry. And on the other side, there is the promotion driven entrepreneurs out there who wants to promote a lot of their products or services out there. So what do you think about these particular two people, and in what category do you fit right into?
I'm jealous of the people who have a very clear thing that they are marketing. I am jealous of them. I would love, and the secret is whatever your service offering is, whatever value you're trying to create in the world, whether you're trying to be a coach or whether you're trying to be a consultant, the trick is to actually productize that offering so that you can speak to it in terms of its features and benefits. That's a secret that we don't necessarily focus on enough. However, I have started sort of direct to consumer businesses before. I started a restaurant, a health food restaurant. Yeah, it was a nightmare. On paper, it was a success. On paper, I made money. In reality, or that is reality, but my own experience was an absolute nightmare. 7 days a week, 80 hours a week. It's never over while doing other businesses.
This
So it
is,
was
yeah.
a personal disaster and a professional success. Okay. And that was a much simpler marketing concept, Rohit, because I could be like, do you want this? Then come here.
Yeah.
If this is what you're looking for, then
We are
we
here.
created this experience for you. When you are marketing services or value add, anything that's more nebulous than that, it can
Yeah.
feel 10 times more complicated. And I'm definitely on the service and value add side of the world.
R-
But the trick then is for me to always think about it in terms of if this were a product, how would I talk about it? What does it create for the user or the client or the customer? What experience does it provide them? And then talk to them using the same language.
Right. And you did talk about that particular thing which stuck my mind, and I'll always remember this. It's more about like if you have got the professional success, it doesn't really mean that the personal success would be definitely on at par or something like that. It may be at discount and you won't be satisfied with that. So you need to find the right balance, because entrepreneurs or business owners always try to compromise on a lot of things. And I feel that it shouldn't be the case. It's more about the kind of effort that you are putting up. The outcome should be related to that. And there comes the relationship of the effort and the outcome as well. Few people put a lot of effort as well, but they don't get the kind of outcome they are looking forward to. So how do you see to this particular theory? And again, I feel that we have to give a lot of time to the business so that it grows. So the time's impact on business growth is something that I always feel is very important. These days I don't find people paying a lot of attention to that. They just want easy and quick success. That may come, that may not come, and again, that should not lead to shutting down of your business. And while doing so, people always try to apply a lot of pressure as well to achieve goals. So do you think that applying pressure will yield great results?
Yes, for a time.
For a
And then
time.
it won't. Yeah, something will break. So, for example, I'm a triathlete. I am
Yeah.
an amateur triathlete, but I am a competitive triathlete. So, it's definitely not how I make a living, right? But when I compete, I like to win. And that's great. And being pressured, feeling the pressure of that and not wanting to embarrass myself. And by the way, triathlon is run, bike, swim.
Cycle. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know.
it's not in that order. It's actually swim, bike, run. That's the
Yeah.
correct order. Sorry. I should know that. Um, so it's multidisciplinary, right? And it takes a lot of work to be able to show up and do that. Now, I had many years where I trained under pressure. And you know what, Rohit? I did fine. Like it worked for
Oh.
me. Yeah. But guess what happened? Two things. One is emotionally or just like
Hmm.
mentally just completely burnt out because what is
Yeah.
the joy in that? Like so you win for your age group, you stand on the podium for 42 seconds maybe, and you get like your little trophy. Okay, fantastic, great. But my whole life was existing around being motivated by pressure and fear of failing. Physically, it took its toll as well. Now, this is a metaphor or an analogy for
Got
what
it.
we do in business. We want to win. We want to come out on top. We want to make a bunch of money. And then we find that mentally and spiritually, we're just completely burnt out. And then physically, and people don't make this connection enough. Physically, it's the same. You're completely physically, spiritually, and mentally depleted. So, what do? You figure out your why. Why are you doing this? I now compete and I race because I love it. Like, I absolutely love it. Do I enjoy winning? You bet I do. Do
Yeah.
I think about that when I'm out there training? I absolutely do not. I'm doing a lot of the same behaviors with a completely different result. And that's what I would encourage in business. What are you doing and why? And is that why going to sustain you? Because so many of us get so focused on some goal of success that we completely forget that your life is made up of every single day you are living beating that. So what does that look like? Because that's the real secret to
Right.
life. It's how are you spending your days and how do you feel when they're over?
So true. That is something that we have to understand. Again, you did talk about being triathlete is something that will always like sport has got the best ability to relate anything that you do in your life, be it the business or the life itself. It teaches you a lot. So you build resilience, you build that particular winning ability as well, and you know like how to get things done, what kind of efforts you have to put in. So definitely that was really insightful, Ella. I have been loving this conversation, Ella, and it's totally resonating with the kind of topic that we have chosen for this podcast episode. And as we are moving ahead, I feel like there are many people who feel that if someone is making more money, then they are better at that particular game or the business in some way. So it's that particular common notion that they have fitted into their own mind. So if we talk about the biggest mistakes few people like have to avoid during their first year, what would be they?
I hope you don't mind me using one more sporting analogy
Sure.
to explain this. If I am swimming and I'm training and I'm in a pool, normally when you do triathlon, you're very often in open water, a lake or an ocean.
Yeah, I know.
When I'm in a pool and I'm competing or training, think of how much faster I'm going if I'm focused on my own lane versus trying to swim and judge to the left of me and judge to the right of me. What am I physically doing? Am I going faster or am I going more slowly?
Right.
When you are focused, in short, stay in your own lane. Focus on what you're doing and why you're doing it, and stop giving energy to whether somebody else is doing it differently or better. That's not even relevant to your success. It's only relevant if you look at life as a pie, like an actual pie. It is finite. And if Rohit gets a piece, that is less pie for me.
Yeah.
And Rohit, the bigger your pie piece is, the less abundance there is for me. If you look at the way the world truly is, which is creation is limitless and it exists in absolute abundance, then your creation, whatever you get and create and receive in this world, has absolutely nothing to do with my share. So that's the first thing that I would say. But you were very specifically asking me also, what mistake do I see people making?
Yep.
So in addition to that sort of meta worldview, I think that too many people, tying back to where we started this conversation, Rohit, too many people spend so much time consuming, meaning taking in information, even
Hmm.
listening to those podcasts and reading books and studying other people's models. And again, definitely learn from people who are doing better than you and know when it's time to take action. And it's always time to take action before you're ready, because we can go in circles for years consuming instead of creating. That's the number one thing that I see with people right now.
Love that. That is something that we have to understand. And again, the analogy that you used about the swimming, it's totally perfect. We have to cater to our own lane. You can look at the others, like at what speed they are driving or something like that, or at what speed they are swimming. But it's more about your efforts, how you can get better at that particular task or at that particular game. That is something will bring in results.
Yeah, I want to say, because if it sounds like we're contradicting where we started, which was learn from others, that's not the case. So let's just use this analogy very quickly and say, I'm going to look at that guy who's 10 times faster than I am, and I am going to study his technique, and I am going to learn how to improve my stroke or my form or whatever. Absolutely. But when it comes to the doing, that is my doing, eyes in my own lane. Know when it is time to take action and focus on execution instead of on what everybody else is doing, to put it simply.
Preach. Definitely. And again, when we are talking about the business, we all have got team members out there who will be helping us with different tasks of the business. So, what do you feel the importance of building business that can operate without the owner? Because I have seen a lot many businesses out there who have got the owner, but you won't be able to see that owner playing a that crucial role. They will be taking decisions, but again, they have got the people to take those big decisions, and they'll be just running through that particular owner. So, is it important to build that kind of a business, or do you want to be present out there and you'll be always monitoring that business?
I mean, that's the dream, right? Is all these buckets of passive income. That's the dream. I'm terrible at it. I am terrible at it. My hands are in everything. And it has, when I work with large corporations, I say to the CEO, I'm like, you have got your fingers in what everybody is doing. And it's actually your job to build teams that do this for you. You have a very simple job. It's not easy, but it
Yeah.
it involves like 4 or 5 things. When you're involved in 3 dozen things, you are costing your business growth. The same thing is true for the small business owner who is doing everything himself or herself. And I am 100% guilty of that, Rohit. I still edit my own podcast. Like, that's
Me too.
insane. Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not giving that up, because one of the reasons it's so successful is because I edit out a lot of the content that does not add value. And so even if I sent it off to somebody, they would make it sound better, which is something that I also care about doing, but they wouldn't know how to tweak the content the way that I want to do it.
Yeah,
What does
that's
that
very
mean?
important. Yeah.
Well, it means that in doing everything myself, because that's not the only thing, in doing everything myself, I've limited my own growth. So that is why I'm in the middle of up leveling right now, is so that I can start creating resources around me to do some of the things that I'm not great in. So what you're describing, that is a world I do not know. I have never set up a business and let it run in the background. That sounds fabulous. Would love to do it.
That only exists on internet.
And I just check in once a month. How you doing? Everybody okay? That sounds great. But that's probably not my calling. I will always create things that are close to me and meaningful to me. And at the same time, I am limiting my growth if I'm not allowing for people to be better than I am at a lot of components of that business.
Right. And if that ever happens, Ella, there has to be a documentary on that.
You'll be the first to know.
Because the idea stemmed from this particular podcast episode. Great. Now, when we talk about the business or doing something, we always seek that internal validation. Like, this is going good. Someone has to say that no, you're doing the right job. So, what's your take on the importance of internal validation as well? And how do you identify constraints of business to grow? Because there are many out there. And it could be different for each and every industry, but in your own case, what kind of constraints you have seen and how you have tackled them?
Okay, well, with regard to validation, I made a t-shirt and put it on my website that said, not seeking validation, but thanks anyway. And the reason I did that was because that can destroy your entire life. And I don't mean to be dramatic, but if you're doing everything to make your dad proud of you, or to make your mom be able to brag about you to her friends, or to make some invisible panel of people judging your life, which we make up in our head, by the way, if you're doing everything in order to check off boxes with people who are not you, you are on the fast track to an unhappy, unfulfilled life. Like, I'll just
Yeah,
leave
yeah,
that there.
makes
So
sense.
you got to find a way to release the need to live for other people's validation. And that requires tuning into yourself, to checking in with yourself, to starting to rely on your own intuition. But I'll leave that there. You asked also about how do you identify control? Tell me that question again,
Constraints,
Rohit.
like there exist constraints in the business growths. So how do you identify them and tackle them as well?
Listen, results always tell the truth. So, what results are you looking at? What results are you measuring? If you have what I call a real world business, which is not right, but a physical business, are you looking at your revenue? Are you looking at your revenue and not looking at your profitability? That's interesting.
Hmm.
Are you measuring customer satisfaction? Are you measuring employee satisfaction? Your results will always tell you the truth. This is 100% true in personal development. Rohit, if you're like, wow, financially I'm doing well, and career wise, I feel like I'm on a growth track, but socially I'm a zero and nothing's going on there. And my relationships, my intimate relationships, even my social relationships are really not going anywhere. Like, if you take an audit of what I call the life balance wheel, the major sectors that make up any individual's life, if you take an audit, which I highly recommend doing quarterly, by the way, the results of that will always tell the truth. I do an exercise with people where we quite literally have this wheel, and it has everything from finance to like your mental state, to the environment that you spend your time in, to your intimate relationships, to your social relationships. Like, you get the idea. Career, um, uh, all the things, Rohit.
Yeah.
And if you're not asking the question, then you're definitely not measuring. Then you aren't paying attention to the results. But
Hmm.
in business and in your personal life, paying attention, asking the right questions, and being honest with yourself about how you got there is the only answer in any kind of business, to bring
Any
it back
kind
to
of
the heart
person.
of your question.
So true. And it's really important that we answer it in a very right way and in a very honest way. That is something that we have to adhere to, because when we are authentic about our journey, it brings in great results. It makes people happy as well, because that builds trust. And again, people buy from the trust. And when we talk about like selling something or being into the service industry or having that particular product, I feel that we all need sales people out there. So the cost of finding versus training those salespeople is something which could be directly or indirectly proportional. At times, that decision will be going in a very right direction, or at times we will be failing at it. So, how do you balance this particular thing? Like, if you want to find the right people, what's your approach so that it helps the audience to know like how they should be approaching the salespeople and how do you train them?
That is super interesting, because I have never relied on a sales team for my own businesses. And of
Oh,
course, in the corporations that I've worked in, we have had sales teams of 3 to 300 people. So,
amazing.
yeah, so I've experienced this on both sides. So, in the online world, you could look in a way, forgive the comparison, but you could look at your audience as your salespeople. And what I mean is, good salespeople are ambassadors. They are
Yeah.
ambassadors for your product or your service. So when you're creating content like you are, your listeners, they're your sales force because they are your ambassadors. And it's kind of weird and a little bit tacky to think of them as your salespeople, but hear me out. They are the ambassadors for your brand. They are the ones telling other people to listen to your
Hmm.
show,
Yeah.
as one example. And in so for my consulting business, I have never relied on a team of people. Again, very boutique firm, and we only take on like 3 clients a year. So it it has not been reliant on a sales force. But of course, the clients I work with have massive teams of salespeople, and sometimes all over the world, right? And the simplest thing that I can say there is, when you talk to them only in terms of revenue and KPIs and monthly financial targets, you are completely missing the point and you're leaving money on the table.
Yeah.
So even if your goal is to increase your sales, and whose wouldn't be, nothing wrong with that. But even when that's your goal, by not treating them as human beings who are ambassadors for your company, your product, or your service, you are leaving money on the table because they
Right.
should understand not just what you do, but they should understand why you do it. And they should understand how their job changes people's lives. And I don't care if you're selling software or shoes, they should understand in the vernacular of your culture how what they do changes people's lives for the better. And if they can't answer that question, and if they don't answer that question almost in the same way, then you have left opportunity on the table. Does that make sense?
Yep. And again, it's all about grabbing opportunities that are out there into the industries, but it's more about like what's your approach towards it? Like, or do you want to grab all of them? Because at times, few opportunities has to be given a pass. You don't really have to focus on them, and then again, you need to find your own way of dealing with those particular things. But when we talk about, like we were talking about the sales thing, I feel it is equally important to have the belief into the product as well. So how do you see that?
Oh, it again, you have to tap into the benefits, not just the features, so to speak. So what I mean by that is, if let's say you're selling a widget, if you're like, this widget does this and it does it at this speed and with this many megabytes, and I'm obviously just making up nonsense, but if all I know are the features and I can't explain how my little widget changes the world, and it can be as mundane as an air filter in your home. Okay, I'm trying to think of like the most boring thing you could possibly think of, with apologies to the air filter industry. But I I am not talking about the width and the number of fibers in my air. I'm talking about how people suffer from allergies and people want to have their pets, and they love the emotional connection that they have with their pets, but they can't exist in the same space with them, or how the quality of our air has declined, and that is unfortunate, but we can control what we can control, and that is the environment in our home. And so we are creating a safer environment. Like, you see what I'm doing? I'm tapping into the emotional resonance of what I'm selling, and not because the world is all sunshine and daisies and we're not all out here like trying to make it sound like we are creating world peace by selling our air filters, but that's just the bare bones of it, Rohit. Is if
Yeah.
we are not
Yeah.
tapping into the emotional resonance of whatever it is we're creating, then we are selling a commodity. It does not matter what it
Right.
is.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so true, and love this perspective. And coming on to the last part of this episode, Ella, it has been a great conversation, and we are heading towards the end. This conversation is so soulful and meaningful that I could have gone on and on about this. But when we are talking about the business, when we are talking about making money and contributing to this particular society or the industry or whatever we are doing, it's all about the only legacy that we are creating is has to be like. The only real legacy is living the human race better. So what's your take
Mm.
on to that, and what do you see in future?
You know, The concept of legacy always hits me a little bit funny, not because there's anything wrong with it, but I am under no illusions that I will be remembered 2 generations from now. So I have a son, and my son will carry my legacy into the world in some way, but then it's his. And then
Yeah.
it's his life, and it's whatever I've instilled in him that he takes with him, but it is his life. And his children, should he have any, will know who I am, and their children will not. Like, I don't live in a world where I think I'm going to matter 3 generations from now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So for me, and this isn't for everybody, I'm not suggesting that it should be, but for me, it motivates me so much more to think about how I can influence the world right this second. And let's be honest, the world is like a fairly messed up place most days. And if you turn
Yeah.
on the news, it's always messed up all the time somewhere, right? And that can feel so overwhelming and very disheartening and depressing. And for me to combat that, I look at, okay, what can I do right now where I am in my communities? And that motivates me every day to make someone's day better, to leave value with somebody, to learn something from somebody, to thank somebody, to uplift or amplify somebody else's work. Like that, actually being able to live right now, Rohit, motivates me 10 times more.
Absolutely, and motivation is something that like we all need that spark of motivation. It will ignite the fire in us, and it will put us on the journey of like getting those things achieved in whatever way we are doing or wanting to get things done. So it's more about that. And again, I believe that this episode will be a kind of a episode where people will be able to learn a lot of new things. Will be able to see what kind of approach they should be having once they are running their business or wanting to start the business as well, because we have touched upon various points of having that business or running that business. So that is something that I loved, and it was so meaningful conversation with you, Ella. It has been such a pleasure to hosting you, and I feel that it will add a lot of value to the audience as well. So thank you so much for your time, and I wish you all the best in your future endeavors.
Thank you so much.